The Pharisees hated the Herodians. The Herodians despised the Pharisees. They agreed on almost nothing. The Pharisees were religious purists, men who memorized every line of the law, who built their whole identity around keeping Israel faithful to God. To them, Rome was an abomination, and anyone who cooperated with Rome was a traitor. The Herodians were the opposite, political operators, pragmatists. They owed their power to the Roman Empire, and they intended to keep it. To them, the Pharisees were dangerous idealists who'd burn the whole country down over a principle. These two groups had no business being in the same room together. But one morning, they showed up side by side because they agreed on exactly one thing. Jesus had to be stopped. They came to him with a question designed so carefully, so precisely, that there was no safe answer. No matter what he said, he was finished. At least, that was the plan. They opened with flattery. Mark chapter 12, starting at verse 13. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." Luke's account tells us they sent spies, men who pretended to be sincere. Listen to that flattery. Every word is calculated. They're not praising him. They're boxing him in. You're a man of integrity. You teach the truth. You don't play politics. They're making it impossible for him to dodge the question without looking like a hypocrite. And then they drop it. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? Here's why this is a perfect trap. If Jesus says, yes, pay the tax, he's endorsing Roman occupation. He's telling a crowd of oppressed Jewish people that it's fine to fund the empire that conquered them. The crowds will turn on him. He's a collaborator, a sellout, a friend of the oppressor. If Jesus says, no, don't pay, the Herodians are standing right there. They will walk straight to the Roman governor and report that a popular rabbi is inciting tax rebellion. That's sedition. That's a death sentence. There is no safe answer. That's the whole point. They didn't come to learn. They didn't come to have a conversation. They came to destroy him. And Jesus knew exactly what they were doing. Jesus doesn't answer the question. Instead, he does something no one expected. Mark 12, verse 15. But Jesus, knowing their hypocrisy, said, "Why are you trying to trap me? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." He calls it out. He names it, hypocrisy. And then he asks for a coin. Now, why a coin? Why not just answer? Because the coin is the answer. They brought him a Roman denarius, the standard coin used to pay the imperial tax. And this wasn't just any coin. Scholars commonly identify it as the denarius of Tiberius Caesar, and what was on it would have made every faithful Jew in that crowd uncomfortable. On the front, a portrait of Tiberius with an inscription that read, "Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus," a Roman emperor claiming to be the Son of God. On the back, a seated figure, likely Livia, Tiberius's mother, depicted as the goddess of peace, and another inscription, High Priest. Caesar claiming to be the highest religious authority in the world. So when Jesus held up that coin and asked, Mark 12, verse 16, whose image is this and whose inscription? He wasn't asking an obvious question. He was making every person in that crowd look at what they'd been carrying in their pockets. A coin that called Caesar the Son of God. A coin that called Caesar the High Priest. These Pharisees, men who obsessed over ritual purity, who wouldn't eat from the wrong dish or walk too many steps on the Sabbath, they were carrying a coin with a graven image and a blasphemous inscription. and Jesus made them produce it themselves. He didn't need to say it. Everyone saw it. Mark 12, verse 17. Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. That's the most quoted line in the whole passage, and most people stop right there. Jesus said, pay your taxes, end of story. But look closer. Jesus never said, pay the tax. He said, give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The coin had Caesar's face on it. It's his image, his metal, his system. Give it back if he wants it. But then he added a second clause, a clause nobody asked about. And to God what is God's. That's where the whole thing turns. If Caesar's image on the coin determines what belongs to Caesar, then whose image determines what belongs to God? Genesis 1, verse 27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. The coin bears Caesar's image. You bear God's image. Give the coin to Caesar if he asks for it, but never forget, you belong to God. The early church father, Tertullian, writing around 200 AD, captured it like this: render the image of Caesar, which is on the coin, to Caesar, and the image of God, which is on man, to God. So give to Caesar indeed money, to God yourself. Otherwise, what will be God's if all things are Caesar's? Otherwise, what will be God's if all things are Caesar's? Jesus didn't dodge the question. He didn't answer it either. He transcended it. He took a question about taxes and turned it into a question about identity. And Mark tells us how the crowd responded. They were amazed at him. 2,000 years later, so am I. It might be the most brilliant answer anyone has ever given to a question designed to destroy them. For 2,000 years, powerful people have taken that first clause, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and used it as a blank check. In the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev reportedly claimed Jesus was the first socialist. Soviet authorities cultivated what historians call red priests, clergy who cooperated with the state, and used scripture to teach Christians that total obedience to the Communist Party was their religious duty. Churches were shuttered, property was seized, dissenters were imprisoned or killed. In China, the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, established in the 1950s, required all Protestant churches to register with the communist government. The Christian Manifesto of 1950 demanded that the Chinese church obey the new regime and sever all ties with the West. Unregistered house churches were, and still are, raided. Pastors are imprisoned, Bibles are confiscated. Cuba, North Korea, and elsewhere. Wherever the state demands total allegiance, the result is the same. But Jesus never said, give Caesar whatever he wants. He never said, Caesar's authority has no limits. He never said, if Caesar takes everything you own, that's God's will. In fact, the Apostle Peter, one of Jesus' closest followers, said the opposite. Acts 5, verse 29. We must obey God rather than human beings. He said this to the Sanhedrin when they ordered the apostles to stop preaching. The early church understood something that every tyrant since has tried to make them forget. When human authority demands what belongs to God, you obey God. There's a difference between paying a tax and surrendering your conscience. There's a difference between civic responsibility and state worship. Jesus drew that line, and every tyrant since has tried to erase it. I didn't set out to make a political video, but you can't read Render Under Caesar honestly without asking, who is Caesar today? The American founding fathers broke away from England in part over taxation without representation. They knew what it felt like to have a distant power reach into your pocket. Once the founders of this country were gone, two groups began fighting a battle that has never stopped. On one side, those who wanted to centralize the power to control the nation's money supply. On the other, those who fought them. In 1791, Alexander Hamilton created the first bank of the United States, the country's first central bank. It lasted 20 years. Congress let its charter expire. In 1816, the second bank was created. I'm from Tennessee, same as Andrew Jackson. And Jackson had something to say about central banking that sounds an awful lot like someone else we've talked about on this channel. When the president of the second bank came to Jackson for a re-charter, Jackson's words have been passed down for nearly 200 years. "You are a den of vipers and thieves. I have determined to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out." A den of vipers. If you watched our video on Jesus flipping the tables, you'll remember what he called the money changers in the temple, a den of robbers. Different century, same language, same anger. Jackson killed the bank. For 80 years after that, America had no central bank. The same pattern played out with income tax. The original Constitution made a broad income tax practically impossible. For its first 73 years, the United States had no income tax. It took the Civil War to introduce the first, and it was repealed when the war ended. A second attempt in 1894 was struck down by the Supreme Court. Then came 1913. In that single year, the 16th Amendment made a permanent income tax constitutional, and the Federal Reserve Act created a new central bank, designed in secret at a meeting on Jekyll Island by a handful of bankers and government officials, a senator, a treasury official, and some of the most powerful financiers in the country. Both ideas had been tried before. Both had been rejected. In 1913, both came back, and this time they stayed. Now in 2026, we're reconsidering the effects of those decisions and asking the same questions Americans have been asking since the founding. Who controls the money? How much power is too much? And what happens when a small group of people get to decide what your money is worth? Karl Marx, in the Communist Manifesto, listed his steps toward a centralized state. Near the top, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. He considered it foundational. Now the Federal Reserve isn't technically a state-owned bank. Its structure is a hybrid of public authority and private banking interests. But the function is striking. A small committee of unelected officials sets interest rates, the price of money itself, for the entire economy. Whether the people fixing the price of the most important market in the world answer to the state or to private banks, the result is the same. A handful of people make decisions that affect every dollar in every pocket. That's closer to the spirit of Marx's prescription than most people realize. I think this deserves honest scrutiny, and I know not everyone will land where I land. Some economists argue the Federal Reserve has prevented the bank panics that devastated ordinary families every decade before it existed. Others argue it's concentrated dangerous power in too few hands. Honest, faithful people disagree about this, but I don't think the question should be off limits. When Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar," who is Caesar today? Is it the president? Is it Congress? Is it the central bank that controls the value of the money in your pocket? Is it the system itself? I know what this sounds like. I'm not saying America is a communist country. It's not. The United States has free markets, private property, and constitutional protections that Marx would have abolished. But Marx was a careful observer of how power consolidates. And when he listed his steps toward a centralized state, controlling the nation's credit and money supply was near the top. He considered it foundational. He wasn't wrong about the mechanism. He was describing a pattern that shows up in all kinds of governments, not just the communist ones. The question isn't whether America is Marxist. The question is whether we've examined who controls the money and whether that power has limits. There's a story behind that meeting on Jekyll Island, the secret gathering, the powerful men, and what they built. We have an episode planned for it. We'll get there. So what was Jesus actually saying? Well, the scholars disagree. So let's walk through some of their thinking. Some take the compliance reading. Jesus was telling people to pay their taxes, and there's strong support for that. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Rome, said it plainly in Romans 13, verses 6 and 7. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. Governments have a legitimate function, and contributing to that is not sinful. This is a mainstream, respectable reading held by mainstream theologians for centuries. We'll return to Romans 13 later in the series. Paul's teaching on government authority deserves its own careful look. Others take the subversive reading. Jesus was subtly undermining Caesar's authority by stripping him of divinity. Caesar's coin has Caesar's image. Fine. Give back his little metal disc. But everything else, your life, your allegiance, your worship, belongs to God alone. Caesar gets a coin. God gets everything. And then there's what I'd call the transcendence reading. Jesus refused to play on their terms. He didn't endorse Rome. He didn't incite rebellion. He reframed the entire conversation from politics to identity. The question isn't, should I pay taxes? The question is, who do I belong to? I don't think these readings contradict each other. Pay your taxes, yes, but understand that no government has a claim on your soul, your worship, or your identity. Those belong to God. This channel isn't going to tell you what to think about taxation, but I will tell you this. Anyone who uses Mark 12:17 to give a government unlimited authority is only reading half the verse and ignoring the half that matters most. So let's go back to the coin. Whose image is on it? Every fiat currency in history has borne the image or symbols of its issuing government. The dollar has U.S. presidents. The pound has monarchs. The euro has European architecture. The yuan has Mao. The ruble has national monuments. Every bill, every coin, stamped with the image of its Caesar. That's not an accident. Money is power, and power wants you to know who's in charge. Bitcoin has no face on it. No president, no king, no parliament, no central bank. It wasn't issued by any government. It can't be debased by any government. It doesn't bear anyone's image. When Jesus said, whose image is on this coin, he was pointing at something deeper than money. But the principle still holds. Caesar's image on the coin meant Caesar controlled the money. What happens when the money doesn't have anyone's image on it? The question the Pharisees asked was about taxes. The answer Jesus gave was about identity. What has Caesar's image? Give it to Caesar. What has God's image? Give it to God. And give yourself to neither a government nor money. Give yourself to God. That's what Jesus said. And 2,000 years later, it still amazes everyone who hears it. If you want to keep exploring what the Bible says about money, government, and freedom, subscribe. We're just getting started. If the questions in this video stirred something, go watch The Vineyard Workers. It's already on this channel. Jesus told a story about a landowner who paid every worker the same wage, no matter when they showed up. And when people complained, he asked, don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? That's sovereignty, and it connects directly to what we talked about today. Next time, faith without works is dead. James wrote that faith without action is meaningless. So what does faithful action look like when it comes to money? I'm Patrick, and this is the Gospel of Bitcoin.